do it. Okay, so if we have an example where, there's two long-term friends, and one long-term friend goes through some major stressful stuff, and so they don't reach out to the other friend, and then the other friend doesn't reach out, and then both people are thinking they're being neglected, then at root, there is some wisdom and understanding that can bring peace with this. Because a lot of times what'll happen is there's two main mentalities people go into when it comes to relationships like this. And the two like everyday attitudes are either what can I give or what can I get? And when things get stressful and busy, we go into survival mode and we may shift to what can I get?
Of course.
So in these moments, we're not giving, but we're hoping to receive. And then when we don't receive, we build resentments because we're living with the attitude of what can I get? And we do this unconsciously. And, so we don't really know we're doing it because we're just trying to get through the day. And this is some ways we do it. So first thing is, I think, all friendships and relationships are meant for growth. They might not all be meant to last long term, but I do feel like they do come into our lives for reasons. And it's a shame to not grasp and pull as many learning lessons out of these relationships as we can, so we can move forward and be even better in future relationships. So I think it's really good to, first of all, develop an awareness of how this attitude might show up. So what are some, let's just brainstorm. What are some examples of specific things people might do or say if they have an underlying attitude of what can I get? What's in it for me? Like, what are some different things they might do or say?
Just listing out what like the person may have done, like so-and-so didn't call me all week, or so-and-so didn't do this for me. It's just about what they didn't do. So I would say an individual like that would like list off the things that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think naturally too, like when you're in that mindset, you don't usually look within. You're always looking outside of yourself. And so it kind of blinds you to only see that and look for that too. And you'll find it. You'll find anything you want to find if you focus on it enough.
Yeah, I love it. So you get these unspoken expectations on other people that they're supposed to give to us. And that's the rule. Like, you were supposed to call me, I was busy. And it's like, wait a minute. Who agreed to this?
Yes.
What you don't know is I've been going through some stuff too. We both shifted into what can I get survival mode. Right. And now we're both resenting each other. And this doesn't make sense. This is a pattern. It should be you and I against the pattern, not you and I against each other. Let's talk about this whole me versus we dynamic and what happens, right? Like, absolutely. People will have an attitude of, what do I get out of this? What's in it for me? Can you give me this? I was wondering if you could hook me up with that. Can I get this? I'm looking out for number one. People say that as if it's a sign of strength, when really it's a sign of cowardice, right? If you really want to look out for number one, you've got to look out for number one with regard to others, because you need others. And that's where I find that mentality can be completely disempowering and devastating for people in terms of the havoc it'll wreak in their life, right? Yeah, so people will have a fear of being left behind because they're focused on perceived entitlements instead of contributions, right? They resent those who are profiting or succeeding in any way if they get no piece of the pie, right? They don't take time to understand other people's needs and concerns because they're not interested in giving. So they're not interested in understanding. So they completely bypassed seek first to understand, because they're all about what can I get? Other people don't matter, right?
Yeah.
And then they indulge in gossip or mean-spirited talk behind people's backs sometimes, and harsh, mean judgment of others is a tendency, in the hopes that in bringing others down, they'll benefit, raise themselves up. It's the old idea of chopping off. If you chop off everyone's heads, you'll be taller, right? So These are some of the ways the what can I get shows up.
So
Right?
resentment, judgment, gossip. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and then what happens is this, you know, what does that lead to? When people live by that attitude, what does it lead to? Do you have any thoughts?
I would say just further disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for the individual, because then you're kind of like checklisting certain things to happen in order for you to be happy.
Yeah.
And that takes you away from the moment, because you're trying to like you're trying to almost predict the future or what should happen and create these entitlements.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So it leads to a selfish disposition. It grows selfishness. So,
Okay.
which is self-concern without consideration for others, where we become interested in self-gain, selfish ambition, and it leads to self-isolation.
Yes.
But then the villain qualities grow from that. We develop antisocial behaviors, right? Like selfishness, human beings are pro-social. Like once you develop selfishness behaviors, it becomes repulsive to people, right? And that's where relationships split, because
Right.
there's just like a repulsion factor going on. It leads to anger, which is when your expectations haven't been met. However, you never checked to see if your expectations were realistic or practical, right? So usually it's unrealistic expectations that don't get met. Bitterness, pride, all about, puffing up the self, impression management, greed, arrogance, which is thinking you know stuff when you don't know, confusing your opinion for fact, or thinking my thoughts are right. Why? Because I think them. Like people do all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the callousness, they become insensitive to other people's needs and emotions because they're only so focused on themselves. It can lead to manipulation, where you're using people for self-gain and justifying it with whatever logic you choose that day. Anxiety, because you're worrying about your selfish ambitions not being met often, right? Depression, because your selfish ambitions weren't met in the past, right? Mental disturbance, inner turmoil. Like ultimately what happens is people live for self-gratification and self-indulgence when they have the what can I get attitude. It's a selfish happiness. It's an uninspiring life. It's a legacy of self-indulgence. They just kick and squeal through life like a pig going to the slaughter, because that's what life does when you live that way, right? And it just leads to mental unrest, moodiness, relationship difficulties, spiritual frustration, a hollow sense of happiness, and ultimate disappointment. Okay, so that's kind of where it takes us. Okay, now let's talk about the other attitude for a little bit. What can I give? What can I give? Some people live with that everyday awareness, right? And sometimes we both do either, like,
Right.
it's so you may predominantly live in what can I give, but then there may be moments of weakness where you're just like hyper focused on what can I get without regarding other people and their feelings and what they're going through, right? So we all slip on this. And that's why I want to bring awareness to it, because it's a dynamic. And if you don't understand it, then you'll be ruled by this dynamic unconsciously and be slave to it. So what are some examples of things, specific things people might say or do if they have an underlying attitude of what can I give?
I think it'll just like empower you to have that it would empower you to have more of that drive to like serve others. So even like maybe it comes down to being an open ear for a family member, like being that for someone, or maybe it's like reaching out to check in on people more frequently. It's others driven. So it could be one, that you're a better listener, or two, you're just like providing for others more. So you're you're more present in what they need as opposed to your own selfish needs.
Yeah, those are great examples.
Yeah.
And becoming a better listener, checking in on people, empowered to serve. People who are, when they're in this kind of mindset, they're like, how can I help you? Help me understand you. And then they just listen. What can I do? They'll ask these things,
Right.
And do we appreciate when people are living this way? Do we like them and just like, thank you for being like this? Like we don't always say it, but deep down, it's these people that live this way that really fuel us and support us and shape us into who we are. Because they're just pouring themselves into other people, right? Parents often do this. Like,
yeah.
This is like a lot of like motherly love, fatherly love really has to come through with what can I give? You can't really get much from a baby. You just have to give, right? A young kid.
Yeah, very true. I like another thing I think of is like even just like when you're as a parent, but even like at work and so forth. I mean, you can go there and just do your job, like even as a personal trainer, it's all about being around people. And I find like the most meaningful part of the job is actually connecting with others and getting to understand them and what they need beyond just the exercise or whatever it is that they're striving towards. It's listening for more and how you can be of service beyond that. So I definitely see that a lot of my profession.
Going the extra mile.
Yeah.
Right. At work leads to better. When people are like, what can I get? They are constantly measuring what they have to give.
Right.
Oh, if I'm at work, hold on. They don't pay me to do this. Really? But if you don't do that, the whole company's going to suffer and all of the clients. Not my problem. Right?
Yeah. And I think this attitude like is just more fulfilling long term too. I mean, you get to you're smiling internally for other people like who are like you're putting a smile on their face for. So I mean, I feel like that's true fulfillment. And I don't think there's anybody who feels worse after helping somebody. Right? So I mean, I think that speaks for itself.
It's actually they've shown that like even just altruistic behavior does raise your immunity. Like they've shown this in research. They've demonstrated this because the human species is wired to make the givers strong. Biologically, we're wired that way. And the takers decay. Givers thrive, takers decay.
If that's not motivation, I'm not sure what. No, that's amazing.
Yeah. So
wow.
And here's something to consider too. Like, so you talked about what can we give, and it leads to happiness and everything else. I think it leads to the idea of we instead of me. And it's never like one of the ways people go wrong is they think nothing of their own self-concern and they just give everything to others. That's also a mistake. That's taking it too far because it could be perceived as very narrow-minded to do that. Because if you're just giving everything and not giving to yourself, then ultimately you let everyone down because you're not making your own gifts and contributions sustainable, right? I call it the selfish giver. So that's always a concern. So we always need to make sure that you have concern for self with regard to others. But this attitude leads to an awareness of your connection to others, their needs, how we can help. It leads to a beyond the self disposition. So you become very broad-minded, taking in consideration for all, value for self and others. It grows your hero qualities. Like this attitude leads to more pro-social behaviors, compassion, empathy, inner peace, like mental thriving, like all of these different things, courage, because we'll often put ourselves on the line more for others than we will for even ourselves, right? Like that's the ultimate hero act, is to risk yourself for others, to give for others. And then ultimately, you know, whereas what can I get is all about living for self-gratification. What can I give is all about living to love. It's all about finding your happiness in the happiness of others instead of this self-indulgent happiness. It's all about an inspiring life legacy. It leads to greater peace and thriving relationships, spiritual boost, lasting soul happiness, right? So it leads to all of these different things, you know? So why is it a bad, I mean, here's one of the things to consider. One of the underlying attitudes is behind this is that the people who will be in the what can I give mentality, they think I am connected to others, right? What can I get mentality, their underlying attitude is I am separate from others. Okay. So why is it a bad idea to think of ourselves as an independent, separate individual? Why is that a bad idea?
Well, like you had mentioned, we're social beings and we need other people. So I think when you maybe go into that isolation, you're maybe you're putting yourself on a different standard than other people, like a standing. So that could even lead to more selfish behavior because you're constantly thinking that you're entitled to more than somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of sets us up for developing entitled opinions. It drives a capitalistic mindset because you know, people just think, all right, well, if I'm separate and everything else, I need more for me, right? Because they don't realize how much society supports them. Like a lot of people have this, you know, horrible fear of poverty and this and that. And they're like, hold on, you know, if you lose all your money, society is going to hook you up. You can get money for free, right? Everyone's going to contribute to it. They all pay taxes so that you actually get taken care of. What are you talking about? Don't create some story in your head that's, you know, false and develop an irrational fear. Like there will always be people in society who will go out of the way to help you for whatever's going on, right? Like you will never be like abandoned by society. Even the worst people out there are still in our prisons with a roof that's been put over their heads, meals, safety generally, like electricity, plumbing. We even take care of the worst of people out there, right? And I don't mean worst. That's a bad judgment. I could say those who have committed the worst acts, right?
Yeah.
And been sentenced for it. So we can become very self-focused and selfish. We develop irrational fears, right? And limiting beliefs. And because you'll always, if you think of yourself as an individual, you always do what is best for the individual, but that's not usually what's truly best because you're part of a community. So if you compromise the community for your own reasons, you will also experience the consequences. It's like people who use up too much natural resources, right? For various reasons. So
okay.
I also think it's not really true. We have the everyday perception that we're an independent, separate individual. But I think if you just lift the veil and look beneath the surface, you'll see that it's actually not true. But now, so, I mean, this is where we need to have an attitude shift. I'm connected to others versus I'm separate from others. Why is it a good idea? Conversely, why is it a good idea to think of ourselves as part of a greater community?
Because, I mean, you feel more supported. You don't feel as alone. And I think when you're tackling life as a unit, you're bound to greater.
Yeah.
And like you said, when you're stuck within your own mind and it's you versus the world, I think that's potentially a very miserable way to carry forward. Like there's so much goodness in others and there's so much opportunity to learn from others too, that I feel like you're knocking that down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's not a happy way to live as much, right? I also think when we think of ourselves as part of a greater community, it's one of the fastest ways to develop the virtue of love and concern for all of humankind, right? To be that person that we all love and respect.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just a chemical creature, but we're a spiritual being on earth, connected to many others. And when we act like this, we build more connection. People look up to you, people like you, you're somebody people can depend on and trust. You're building strength around you.
And
Right?
I think too, if you're focused so much on yourself, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but you'd be chasing a lot of like material happiness, maybe more worldly things. I don't know about you, Brendan, but I'm a lot happier when I'm giving to somebody else versus me, like a lot happier. And
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know, for myself, that's just what drives me. That's my fuel.
So I would say that brings us to the next underlying attitude behind this that we just have to get clear on. You know, like, why is it a bad idea? Because people are either investing in people or they're investing in their own worldly success, right? Like the way that the world would measure it. So I look at it this way, because I like to make up little things that are easier to remember. It's like the what can I get attitude is all about conquering the world. I need to be number one, right? The what can I give attitude is all about conquering the hearts. People are your best investment.
Oh,
right. So yeah. Why don't we have a discussion about that? Why is it? Why is it a bad idea to focus on conquering the world?
There's an end. But conquering the world, again, I would just say it's short-lived, maybe short-lived happiness. Like, even if you're number one, on what scale? Everybody has a different scale. And then once you're at the top, there's nobody there to like win with you. You're just going to be standing on that pedestal by yourself. For what? I don't know.
It will be lonely at the top.
Yeah. You might have to beat other people down in order for you to get there.
Yeah, you steamrolled people's emotions on the way up. Right? You're always comparing yourself to others. You become hypersensitive. Mm-hmm. Because, any criticisms or feedbacks is a threat to your desire to be perceived as number one.
And maybe like you're even in that regard, you might not be attached to your true self because you're trying to put on an image of this number one. Yeah.
Yeah, you're focused on impression management, trying to put on an image. It's not really possible to conquer the world. I mean, you could do this. Let me tell you this. It's kind of a childish thing, I think. It's like, it's cute. You think, yeah, you have that attitude. Now, nobody actually says this, but they do it. Anyone who's like, I just need to be number one. Like, it's really, that's what you're doing. Like, how about being number one in everyone's hearts and minds, right? Like, instead of number one in performance and this and that, right? So, here's one of the things with this. You could do this. Imagine you did this. You literally like had more money than anyone in the world, the biggest house, everything else, right? People think you're number one. Now, try to hang on to that. First of all, we live in a universe of entropy. Everything's falling apart. Even if you have the biggest house, it's going to get old and start falling apart. Even if you have money, inflation's going to kick in. You're going to have less money. Like $5 100 years ago was like $100 today. Like, you're not going to be able to hang on to your money. Your
Right.
impression of being number one, the whole time you're in this position of number one, people are trying to knock you off that pedestal. That you cannot manage your impression possibly, because there's always going to be people talking, creating stories about you out of jealousy. People who have the same mindset as you are trying to take you down. It's like a game of King of the Hill, right? And the thing is that, you know, no matter what it is, you can always find somebody better. Like somebody better is going to come along, somebody smarter, somebody faster, somebody stronger. Like you
Right.
can, you're going to, then you know what you have? You end up in a worse place, because now you end up with as somebody who had it all and lost it, and you have to live with that. Like Al Bundy on Married with Children, thinking about his Poke High days. You know, I'm like, it'll never be as good as it was, right? And that's in a more depressing position to be in. To have it all and lose it, like then it's like, great, now look at my life. It's a fraction of what it was. I used to be the best. Now I'm here, and it's hard to live with yourself. So
Yeah.
these are all some bad ideas, I guess, on why it's why we may not want to choose that road. Many people choose that road, by the way, and they encourage others to do it too. They don't realize that, you know, what they're spreading to others. They're like, you need to be selfish, you need to look out for number one, you know, like you need to be the best and all this.
Yeah. And, you know, in dialogue, I can even think of a handful of times where, you know, someone will say like, well, what do they give you? What do they do for you in conversation and so forth? And that just ties back to the what can I get attitude. And then you're constantly searching for it, and then no one's ever good enough. Right?
Hmm.
Good enough quotations.
Yeah, absolutely. So why is it a good idea to conquer the hearts of others?
Because you can inspire the best in yourself and in other people.
Yeah, you inspire the best in others, and when others are better, we all benefit, right? It's like, I think of, you know, how many examples I can think of here. You know, if The Rock decided to just become a lazy drunk, you know, I wouldn't have benefited from appreciating his acting in movies. Or if Tom Hanks did that, or if Jim Carrey decided to feel sorry for himself because of his challenged upbringing, we wouldn't have all benefited from the laughter and joy he's given to the world, right? We don't get to experience the shared gifts of others if they don't rise up to be who they can be. You know, we get to experience the shared gifts, which are the legacy of other people. You know, truthfully, I'm just surrounded by the legacy of other people. I mean, everything from the computer I'm on to this mouse and, you know, the phone and everything is, and the books that I've got here and stuff, like everything is just the legacy of other. I'm surrounded by the legacies of other. There's no legacy of me here. Like I'm just benefiting from the shared gifts of all these other people. People are our best investment. Our lives are really, you know, we have just been showered in the shared gifts of other beings who've gone on here before us. And so we're experiencing a great return on what others have given. So I think, you know, being able to invest in that is always going to be a good thing, you know, giving encouragement and stuff to others. So why else is it a good idea to conquer the hearts of others?
I would say even just to like understand people better. I think that nowadays, especially, sometimes like we get too consumed in like winning this race or climbing career ladders or doing things like that, that are just like running on, like it's like you're running on a hamster wheel, you're chasing something, but you're kind of just, you're not getting anywhere. But I think when you truly understand and connect with other humans, um, naturally you might get to places you would have never had imagined. You might bring other people up, inspire like the greatness in them, so that, like you said, the world could be a better place. So kind of the same answers before. um why else is it good?
Yeah, it's an attractive quality. When you give, you receive. We all depend on each other. You know, you get exponentially more in return. It's the most gratifying thing to be able to love others and give to them. It's what we've always wanted. Really, you're going to get the emotions you've always wanted. You think you're getting those emotions by conquering the world, being number one, thinking, what's in it for me? What can I get? What you get will not give you the emotions that you thought it would. You think getting that extra money or getting that extra recognition will give you a certain set of emotions, but it's not the best way to get those emotions. And it's not even a guaranteed way to do that. You can have all the success and popularity in the world and still be miserable. But one of the best things to do, one of the best things to do is to be able to give to others and contribute to others and find your joy in that. If you, Yogananda once said, why should you think you live in this world to please yourself? To live for self is the source of all misery. To live for self is the source of all misery. Yogananda said that in the book, The Divine Romance, which is a huge book, which I think very few people are ever going to read. I think it was like 500, 600 pages, right? I thought it was a page turner, but but also, we're better able to cultivate and share love and wisdom. Because really the end goal is an inward state. The end goal is an inward state. If you're all about conquering others and everything else, you end up with a hollow happiness at the end of the day. Right?
Right.
It's kind of like a diluted life. And we end up with great disappointment. We get to the end of the road and we realize this isn't it. You can stop and turn around. Our greatness in life does not come from what we take from the world. Our greatness in life comes from what we give to the world. Nobody planned to come here to just take, and then give it all back. Like did our souls sign up for that? We go into the playroom, we grab all the toys we can, but then we have to leave the playroom. It's like, no, let's go into that playroom, which is the earthly material realm, and let's just really connect with each other and know ourselves and know our self-realize and enjoy this journey as much as we can. So I think a lot of times conquering the hearts of others by the power of love is the greatest victory you can win in life. If you consider others first, I think you'll find the whole world at your feet, because that was the greatness of people like Mother Teresa or Jesus, right? Or Gandhi. Like, they lived and died for all. Whereas men of great material power who lived only for themselves are soon forgotten. Yeah. So I think those are some of the things to consider for that. Any other thoughts on that one?
No.
So why don't we consider some of the other things here, which is, those are some of the underlying attitudes. I'm trying to think if there's more because I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but why don't we talk about the end goal? Okay. Where these end up. We got kind of like living for self-gratification and how that looks at the end of the day. And we've got, let's talk about that one first. To me, it seems like it's like being a black hole. Like you're just a black hole sucking everything in when you're thinking me instead of we. And I think all the victories are very fleeting. Worldly happiness is very fleeting when you have a life of self-serving, very uninspiring life. There's tremendous suffering that comes with it. You know, those who go around looking for personal glory are never really great. Those who inspire others are become great for it, you know?
I always think of like crumble at the touch whenever you say that, because like everything that we try to hold on to, we're not gonna die with, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So things that could last on are like love and wisdom and how you impacted others.
Yeah. And I think it's, I don't think it's, I think if people really stopped, press paused, and analyzed where they're going in life and mapped it out, they'd realize that this is not a wise choice to turn here. But people don't map out where their choices take them in life. It's like going to each intersection. Am I going to go right or left here? Okay, I'm going to go left here. Like if you tried to like drive all the way down from Toronto to Los Angeles and you wanted to react at every like stoplight, what kind of a journey is that going to be? It's going to be frustrating. It's going to take a long time to get promising results. You know, there's going to be a lot of inner turmoil and unrest. Whereas if you could just map it out and follow the map, you'd be like, all right, now I can enjoy the scenery. But so many people are living like that reactively when it comes to their ultimate direction. And people who do this, I believe they do that. If they're living with a what's in it for me attitude, like you have not mapped out your journey. Because if you mapped it out, why are you going to that destination? Right? Because this destination is a bitter life. You know, when you see people who are selfish, is their life sweet or bitter?
Definitely bitter.
Yeah. And a tree is known by its fruits, right? So take a look at, we can learn from the examples of others. Like just as some animals can't see beyond a few steps, many people can't see beyond a few years, right? And that's why I said they just kick and squeal their way through life, complaining about it the whole time. But and a villain is somebody who sacrifices others for themselves. You know, that's ultimately, but nobody who lives this way sees themselves as a villain.
Yeah.
Right?
Why do you think that people fall into this attitude?
Well, before I comment on other people, I should comment on my own mistakes I've made in life and just say, and I would say, why do we all fall into it?
Why? Yeah.
There's certainly nothing special about me. And I think we fall into it because of our own ignorance. We just don't know what we don't know, largely. Right? Because I didn't have this all made very clear to me earlier in life. And so I went down that road because I didn't have a map. Like I didn't even know a map was possible or needed. Right? Like, so it's like you don't know what you don't know. And unless you've got like, and so we suffer with it and we don't have anyone else telling us to turn around or pointing out our faults. And sometimes we're sensitive. And when people say you're going in the wrong direction in life, you shouldn't act like that or think like that or do that. We don't take the direction. We just keep going in the wrong direction because we've got too much pride to turn around, or we're too lazy to turn around or whatever. So I think a lot of it is we're just trying to make sense of our existence and we get confused.
Of course.
And confusion is not a crime. So I don't judge others on doing this.
Yeah.
Because we came from the land of oblivion. We don't remember anything and we're here trying to figure it out. And sometimes a really good way to learn a lesson is to do things the wrong way and live through that experience.
And we've all done that.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing that. So
there you go. There you go. But you can also use your free will to pursue wisdom, to find and fill your wisdom gaps. And I think wisdom is the ultimate healer. Like when you can understand things and know what's going on and know the best choices and know why and know how to discipline yourself, like I feel like that is, and get to the truth of everything. I feel like that is the ultimate liberation. And you can use your free will to do that. But too much of the time, we get distracted with mindless amusements and we get obsessed with the paltry tinsel of the material world, collecting stuff and hoarding stuff and all the rest of it. So, you know, we get caught up in things, but I think And I think what ends up happening is we get some negative life outcomes, and those negative life outcomes can be our teacher. When we're focused on what can I get, we get burnout because we're working harder to gain. Social isolation, self-criticism, more pressure on yourself, an unsatisfactory self-image, right? Unsatisfactory social connections, excessive anxieties, indecision, regret, unsociable conduct, restlessness, insincerity, maliciousness, laziness, tendency to manipulate and indulge in excessive self-sacrifice, right? It's hollow victories, hollow happiness, money, fame, success, popularity, power, security, whatever. And it's a very commonly lived life that's just quickly forgotten. Greedy and self-centered, died, and within a couple hundred years forgotten forever. You don't stand out. It's just another rat in the rat race. But that's if you live with the everyday awareness of what can I get, that often becomes just another rat in the rat race, right? That's the final end result. I think of it like a black hole. Like this is it. You just become a black hole, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, let's talk about the other final result. If we're living to love others, right? Can you really love others if you don't love yourself, by the way?
No.
No. So we're not doing it right if we're not loving ourselves too. Right. And I think that's an important distinction, because I think a lot of people are afraid to do this because they think they'll have to destroy them, martyr themselves in doing this. And I don't think that's a very sustainable or essential approach, right?
Love yourself first to love others.
Yeah, exactly. So I think of this more like the sun. Like the sun just gives, right? Can we ever repay the sun for the brilliance it's brought into our life? We go outside, we see the sun, it makes us happy. It shines on our face. It creates the food for us. It creates the warmth so we can live. It supports us in every second of every day. And what do we give the sun? Does the sun ever say, hi, Monica, you owe taxes to me? Because guess who's been burning themselves out since you've been born? Okay.
Yeah.
Does the sun ever say, what's your favorite vegetable? Tomato? Guess who you have to thank for that? Taxes. Pay me your taxes.
Yeah.
Right?
That return.
So what are your thoughts on the end destination of, living with this concept of living with this concept of living to love others? What are your thoughts on where that ultimately takes us?
You can leave the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. A legacy of leaving the world a better place.
And I do think that's what a lot of individuals strive for. I know that's something I strive for, but yeah, that would be one of the big ones for sure.
Yeah. And the peace and contentment of knowing that you're living your life this way.
Yeah.
Right. Also, I think we're also going to get enlightened self-concern. That it's more fulfilling than living to gratify ourselves if we just think in the best interest of living to love others. Deeper connection with others, greater emotional support, right? You inspire more leadership. It builds strong character qualities like patience and humility, right? Greater meaning to life, really. It's like, hey, this isn't just a buffet. I'm just going to try to get everything in my pie hole before I leave, right? Like, grab everything I can, right? It leads to a growth mindset, knowing that we can do better and be better. We're motivated to catch up, right? And, the Sufi poet Rumi once said, give up the drop, become the ocean. And give up the drop, become the ocean. And I think really what he's talking about is, here we give up the ego for the higher self. We give up this sense of me as an individual for me as part of a greater community. We give up this concept of being the drop to become the ocean. Conversely, on the other side, people give up the higher self to become the ego. And that's why they suffer, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that really this leads to lasting soul happiness. People will love you more. You're easier to love. People want to be like you more. They look up to you, role model you a lot more when this is kind of the way that we're living.
And I think it also is like a broadened perspective too, because when you like the way I see living for yourself only is kind of like putting blinders on. It's like me, and you're not seeing that like greater picture or perspective with others included. So I think it kind of puts a cap to happiness or a cap to a fulfilling life.
Yeah. And really what happens is, those ego motivated triggers and reactions block progress. And we have impure motives when we're not paying attention to this stuff.
Right.
We need to detox our impure motives, right? And improve our ability for long-term success in the meaningful areas of life. People think it's a good idea to be selfish. That's why we get here. They think this is a good idea. What can I get attitude, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, that's a good idea. And that's why we're like, let's talk about how it's not a good idea. Let's just map it out. Let's just have a conversation. We've lived long enough, right? Let's talk about how when you have the what can I get attitude, it cultivates ingratitude because you're always focused on having more rather than appreciating what you have. You appreciate what you have, your cup feels full and you're like, what can I give now? Right? If you're all like, what can I get? It creates neediness. You become disposed to jealousy and envy towards those who have what we want. Like, we could talk on and on about where this goes and why it's a bad idea, right? And I'm just ranting now, but what do you think are the roadblocks? Why will people still indulge in this individualistic thinking?
Because it's more uncomfortable to maybe change out of that pattern or that shift that attitude.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in that impression management, that's going to be even more difficult, right? Like you said.
Yeah. I think people will underestimate the work needed to overcome this tendency because, it really becomes a central part of your reality and your existence. And so people will lie to themselves and tell themselves they're working on it, which is the biggest lie that people will use. That just means I've mentally agreed to it, but are taking no clear initiative.
I'm laughing because I've heard that phrase all too many times.
Yeah, the minute somebody says I'm working on it, like that is usually when you know that there's something funny going on. And you say, yes, do you have a clear and concise plan? What is it? And they'll say, oh yeah, well I do. And then they're going to give you some sort of thoughts they had. And I'm like, that's not a plan, right? You have like a twice daily ritual you're doing to shift your own human behavior. So really this is where ego gets in and people need to be humbled more, because usually if they suffer long enough, they'll realize telling myself I'm working on it has never worked for the past 40 years. Why don't I just drop all my distractions and actually get to the heart of the matter and do the work that matters in my life, rather than just doing all this child's play stuff that I think is important, that I tell myself it's important, right? Like people may say, oh yeah, I'm working on it. Life is busy. Meanwhile, they just got off of spending 4 hours on a golf course, hitting a little ball with dimples into little divots in the ground. And they're like, but I can't even make time to shift the central part of my reality, which is the everyday awareness I live with, right? So that's where people can be stuck in their own ignorance and false judgments of what really matters. What people decide really matters is one of the most important decisions they make in life. And few people decide to make a conscious choice on this, me versus we. They're busy deciding what they're going to wear and where they're going to vacation next. And they're planning and mapping all that out, rather than planning out their direction in life, And that's why so many people are unhappy. And if you don't believe me, just go on Facebook and read your feed,
Yeah.
the amount of complaints and everything else, right? So people will underestimate the effort. They will overestimate their own ability. They think a mental agreement is working on it. They lie to themselves. They're never honest with themselves. And how do we know all this? Because we've done all this, right? I'm not speaking as if somebody who's condescending to others. I'm speaking as if I've made more mistakes than I can count in my life. And personally, I'm more ignorant than I can even possibly grasp, but I'm going to try to do the best I can with what minuscule stuff I figure out, Yeah. I also think, it makes it, I think there's social conflicts. Like if you think that we're all one, well, that's good. That might have issues with whatever religion you're a part of, right? You need to see yourself as a different than the rest. Like we are the good ones and they're the bad ones is sometimes the story.
Right.
It can make it different with economics because it'd be like, well, if we think of others and stuff, well, how can I justify, consuming and holding on to so much excess wealth relative to those around me? Like in society, it can make it can really disrupt the apple cart on a lot of the things that people are enjoying right now. Gotcha. Right? But that's why we need to talk about how a lot of those things don't give people what they really want, which is lasting soul happiness. And so they've got to decide that they're done with the things that they're done with the strategies that don't work to give them what they truly want. Because truly what people want are these emotions at the end of the day. And these harmonious thoughts are what they really want. And often this is a better way to get what they want. So, and how do you think, these are some of the roadblocks, how do you think we can move forward with this and internalize it and reinforce it and benefit from this awareness?
Well, kind of similar. I know like I could make this more of like a daily practice or reminder. So even just the statement, like, what can I give? I feel like is important to stay connected to. Even like, what can I give versus what can I get? Because I think that even just hearing that statement will naturally help me kind of navigate my day-to-day decisions. So in answering your question, for me, reminders are huge. Writing things down, having like sticky notes by where I'm at often. So if it's at my office desk or if it's at the studio, I think that would be like a really important reminder. And even just a reflection on like, what did I give today? How did I serve others? It's like a gratitude, like some people do gratitude journals or those 5-minute journals or whatnot. I think that would be a really good like reflection to focus on.
Yeah, love it. And I'll tell you what you gave today. You gave a great talk and vulnerable and open, honest share for whoever's going to watch this recording in future, right?
Right.
There you go. And the day just started.
It just started. 6 a.m. coffee talk. 6:30.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and another thing too is, those are great. Staying in touch with the insights.
Right.
I have a mantra I've repeated to myself. I used to use it for public speaking because to get over fear of or concern of public speaking, I'd stop thinking of me. Right. And I'd just be like, look, I'm not here forever. I'm here to give and share before being forgotten forever from the world of bodies. That's it. And that's what I would think. Like, I'm just be like, I'm not here forever. I'm here to give and share. That's it. And then I don't think about insecurity or anything else because I'm just thinking about giving to the audience. And so I'll just say and do whatever I need to do and won't hold myself back. I think another good idea is to take these questions and debates and write out, even daily, just write out a sentence or two, like what are some specific examples of the what can I get attitude? Write out a sentence or two, right?
Okay.
Become more aware of it, right? Like
Right.
our quiet, unspoken expectations of others, like, I'm waiting for you to call. You're supposed to call me, right? It's
Right.
like, what? What do it's us thinking others need to give to us,
Right.
right? Or it's me against the world and, everybody hates me or whatever. And, well, I'm not, what has that person done for me? Right? Like, try to really become a detective at detecting this,
Yeah.
And then also really try to pay attention to the what can I give attitude. How does that show up in your life? Like, try to see if you can spot where it showed up in your life during the day. Like, it could be something simple, like a waitress just being like, well, is there anything else I can do for you?
Yeah.
It can be little things like that, right?
I like that a lot. The examples part.
Yeah. Find examples.
Yeah.
Increase your awareness, because this awareness has been a part of your life since day one. And we're chatting about it and clarifying it today, but it's always been there, hasn't it? If you look back on your life, you can see examples of people that lived with the what can I get attitude, I'm sure. Do you ever meet anyone like that? Who's like, what's in it for me? Or, if any injustice or anything bad happens, something breaks, they're like, I don't care, it's not mine. Like,
no, I know that. Yeah. I can think of a few examples for sure, but yeah, I feel like catching yourself in your own tracks too can help you understand other people and maybe why they're suffering too.
Yeah. Exactly. So just try to be a detective and find this stuff. Really helps. And then also come up with as many compelling reasons as you can of why it's a bad idea to focus on what can I get. Why is it a bad idea to think of ourselves as an independent, separate individual? How is the statement, we are all one, actually true? Brainstorm that. Write down answers every day. Then you will start to be motivated by that subconscious realization, right? And that becomes conscious. Why is it a good idea to focus on conquering the hearts of others? And why is it a bad idea to think about conquering the world?
I still love that statement. So great. I love that.
So I think why is it a good idea to live to love others? Why is it a bad idea to live for our own self-gratification, self-indulgences, and selfish happiness, right? Like, getting clear on this, because people will still resort back because they're not paying attention and they're just doing the natural thing that happens. It could be very natural for me to let out a huge burp in a funeral, but I'm not going to do it. Sometimes we have to suppress the natural things, right? Like, people think you got to do the natural thing, you got to be you. And it's like, no, the natural thing is not you, right? Like, don't tell yourself that lie now, because you're going to imprison yourself to your natural vices of character, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, we got to train this stuff until this stuff becomes natural, really.
And that's the challenge, but we're just here to get better.
Let me tell you, if it takes you years to master this, if you decide, okay, I'm going to live with this whole what can I give attitude, if it takes you years to master this, imagine your funeral if you became a 10 out of 10 at this, and the things people are going to say about you. Holy shit, Monica was a blessing to my life. Like, I can't even imagine how much I'd be suffering if I never met Monica. Like, I don't know. I am just so grateful she decided to invest in helping and supporting me. Like, people are going to say, like, and at the end of the day, imagine you were like living like Scrooge McDuck. Okay. And you're just creating your little safe of gold coins, and you go diving into it and you swim in your gold coins and your own selfish happiness. You know what you're going to hear at the funeral? You're going to hear crickets, because they've sacrificed others for slips of paper with deceased nobles and coins with beavers and loons on them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So something to think about. This is just kind of like mapping out, preliminary mapping on this. This is something to focus on for life. Like we want to see how this will actually give you what you really want out of life. Because there's lots of directions, but I'm mapping it out. I'm like, this is going to take you, you may not even know where you want to go. Believe me, these motions of lasting soul happiness is where you've always wanted to go. You just weren't clear on it. Here's a way to get there. Right? Avoid the detours of self-indulgence and selfish ambition. Here's a way to get to where you want to go. And now it's just a matter of following that map. All right. Key takeaways from today?
I would say the one-liner is, how can you conquer others' hearts? For me.
Love it. Love it. If you just remember like two things, it's like, how can I conquer the hearts of other people? You know, what can I give? Like those things alone, all this conversation is intended to do is to convince you that's a good idea. To live that way.
Yep.
Hey, it's a good idea to live this way. I know everyone says you should, but that's like painting over dirt. That's not very convincing. Like we need to get this stuff deep in.
Right.
Like, no, like I do not want to be a black hole. I want to be a sun, you know, like just radiate brilliance everywhere and love and give, you know, instead of just sucking and destroying everything. Right.
Right.
Love it. All right. I thought you were a 10 out of 10 today on the call.
Thank you, Brendan.
Absolutely crushed it. And you shared so much profound wisdom. Your examples were awesome. I thought you had very courageous vulnerability, right? You were very heroic for people, many people that you'll never even meet who may watch this recording, even years down the road, because you gave of yourself here today. You woke up, you got on this call for 6 a.m. For some reason, it's always bright here at 6 a.m. and it looks like 6 a.m. on your side, you know, like,
yeah.
So I honor you in your gift of love and wisdom to everyone else here today and everyone else who's joined us on this call. This is our gift of love and wisdom to you that's come through us, not from us. We're all in this together, just trying to figure it out. Go team humanity. Okay, let's do a go team on 3. Fist bump the screen. Right. We're out. Ready?
Here we go.
2, 3. Go team.
Thank you.